The city today known as Istanbul has been the site of human settlement for approximately 3,000 years. The settlement was founded by Thracian tribes between the 13th and 11th centuries BC, whose earliest known name is Lygos. It was colonized by the Greeks in the 7th century BC. It fell to the Roman Republic in AD 196, and was known as Byzantium until 330, when it was renamed Constantinople and made the new capital of the Roman Empire. During late antiquity, the city rose to be the largest of the Western world, with the population peaking at close to 500,000 people. Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which ended with the Muslim conquest in 1453. Constantinople then became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Population had declined during the medieval period, but as the Ottoman Empire approached its historical peak, the city grew to a population of close to 700,000 in the 16th century, at the time second in size only to Beijing, and outgrown by London only in the course of the 18th century. When the Republic of Turkey was founded in 1923, the capital was moved from Constantinople to Ankara. Since 1930, the native name Istanbul has been the sole official name of the city in Turkish and has since replaced the traditional name Constantinople in most Western languages as well. Prehistory. Humans have lived in the area now known as Istanbul since at least the Neolithic. The earliest known settlement dates from 6700 BC, discovered in 2008. During the construction works of the Yeni Kapı subway station and the Marmaray Tunnel at the historic peninsula on the European side, the first human settlement on the Anatolian side, the Fikirtepe Mound, is from the Copper Age period, with artifacts dating from 5500 to 3500 BC. In nearby Kadıköy, a port settlement dating back to the Phoenicians has been discovered. Lygos. The first name of the city was Lygos according to Pliny the Elder in his historical accounts. It was founded by Thracian tribes between the 13th and 11th centuries BC, along with the neighboring fishing village of Semistra. Only a few walls and substructures belonging to Lygos have survived to date, near the Saraglio Point, where the famous Topkapi Palace now stands. Lygos and Semistra were the only settlements on the European side of Istanbul. On the Asian side there was a Phoenician colony. On the site of Lygos, the later Byzantium was located, thus Lygos is accepted as the city which gave rise to Istanbul. Byzantium, Byzantine, Latinized as Byzantium, was the next name of the city. The name is believed to be of Thracian or Illyrian origin and thus to predate the Greek settlement. It may be derived from a Thracian or Illyrian personal name, Byzas. Ancient Greek legend refers to a legendary king Byzas as the leader of the Megarian colonists and eponymous founder of the city. Cape Moda in Chalcedon was the first location which the Greek settlers from Megara chose to colonize in 685 BC. Prior to colonizing Byzantium on the European side of the Bosphorus under the command of King Byzas in 667 BC, Byzantium was established on the site of an ancient port settlement named Lygos during the period of Byzantium. The Acropolis used to stand where the Topkapi Palace stands today. After siding with Pausanias Niger against the victorious Septimius Severus, the city was besieged by Rome and suffered extensive damage in AD 196. Byzantium was rebuilt by the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus and quickly regained its previous prosperity, being temporarily renamed as Augusta Antonina by the emperor in honor of his son. Late Roman period and the Eastern Roman Empire. The location of Byzantium attracted Constantine the Great in 324 after a prophetic dream was said to have identified the location of the city, but the true reason behind this prophecy was probably Constantine's final victory over Licinius at the Battle of Chrysopolis on the Bosphorus, on the 18th of September 324, which ended the civil war between the Roman co-emperors, and brought an end to the final vestiges of the Tetrarchy system, during which Nicomedia was the most senior Roman capital city. Byzantium was officially proclaimed the new capital of the Roman Empire in 330. Following the death of Theodosius I in 395 and the permanent partition of the Roman Empire between his two sons, Constantinople became the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. The combination of imperialism and location would play an important role as the crossing point between two continents, and later a magnet for Africa and others as well, in terms of commerce, culture, diplomacy, and strategy. It was the center of the Greek world and for most of the Byzantine period, the largest city in Europe. Constantine's conversion to Christianity a few years earlier, in 312, had set the Roman Empire onto Christianization, and in 381, during the reign of Theodosius I, the official state religion of the Roman Empire became Christianity, which turned Constantinople into a thriving religious center. After the end of his reign in 337, Constantine declared his three sons as joint heirs of the Roman Empire in a system of co-emperorship. Unfortunately, the sons couldn't govern together peacefully, and the war-aged rivalry split the empire on the north-south line along the Balkan Peninsula. The territory was officially split in 395 when Theodosius I died, leaving his son Arcadius emperor of the eastern half of the empire and his other son Honorius emperor of the western half. Throughout the 5th century, the western half of the Roman Empire lost most of its power through decline in political, economic and social situations, the last Western emperor being deposed by Germanic mercenaries in AD 476. The eastern half, however, was flourishing. According to historians, this flourishing Eastern Roman Empire was then classified as the Byzantine Empire to distinguish it from the Roman Empire. This empire was distinctly Greek in culture and became the center of Greek Orthodox Christianity after an earlier split with Rome, and was adorned with many magnificent churches, including Hagia Sophia, once the world's largest cathedral, the seat of the Patriarch of Constantinople, spiritual leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church, remains. The most famous Byzantine emperor was Justinian. During his reign he extended the Byzantine Empire to its largest boundaries, spreading from Palestine to the tip of Spain. His other achievements include the famous Hagia Sophia Church and the organized law system called the Codex, which was completed in 534. However, Justinian's reign was the greatest influence of the Byzantine Empire. Starting in the 600s, warfare kept Constantinople's power flip-flopping between decline and progression. Alliance with Europe slowly began to break away from the Byzantine Empire between the 7th–8th centuries, when the Byzantine and Roman churches disagreed on various subjects. However, the distinguishing gap placed between the two churches involved the use of icons in the church. Icons being images of Christian holy people such as Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary and the saints. To Byzantine Christians were more than representations. They were believed to possess holy power that affected people's daily lives, while many Byzantines worshipped icons. Many opposed the icons because they tested the authority duties of the emperor. Finally, in 726, Emperor Leo III ordered all icons to be destroyed. The destruction of icons reorganized and reoriented the Byzantine rulers in imperial power. The fierce opposition to icons clashed with the Pope's tolerance of images. The papacy was unwilling to permit sacred images and icons to be destroyed, and this caused eventual separation. The separation caused hatred between the two churches, and cooperation between the two was a struggle. From around the 9th to 13th centuries, Constantinople developed complex relationships with an emerging and later the largest and most advanced state of that time in Europe, Kiev Rus. Constantinople played a significant role in the Kiev Rus development, culture, and politics. Many of the Kiev princes were married to daughters of the Byzantine emperors, and because of this connection Eastern Europe became Orthodox, after it was Christianized by Vladimir the Great of Kiev. However, these relationships were not always friendly. Constantinople was sacked several times over those 400 years by Kiev princes, forcing Constantinople to sign increasingly favorable treaties for Kiev, the texts of which were preserved in the primary chronicle and other historical documents. Byzantine constantly played Kiev, Poland, Bulgaria, and other European nations of the time against each other. Near 1204, Constantinople began to decline in power because of the failure of the Third Crusade. Self-confident Western Europeans decided to again try to capture the Holy City of Jerusalem in the Fourth Crusade, but this time the plan was to capture the Byzantine Empire as well. In 1204, Western armies captured Constantinople and ransacked the city for treasures. The Pope decried the sacking of Constantinople but ordered the Crusaders to consolidate the gains in the city for a year. The Crusaders chose Baldwin of Flanders to be the new Byzantine emperor. He, along with other princes and the Venetians, divided the empire amongst themselves. They never made it to Jerusalem. This new Latin Empire at Constantinople lasted until 1261, when the Byzantines under the command of Michael VIII Palaeologus recaptured the city and some outlying territory. After this, Constantinople never regained its former glory. Rather than a thriving metropolis, Constantinople transformed into a collection of villages, and became a semi-ghost town with, as Ibn Battuta noted, sown fields within the city walls. The city by 1453 held less than a tenth of its former population. Ottoman Empire. The city, known alternatively in Ottoman Turkish as Constantine or Istanbul, was the capital of the Ottoman Empire from its conquest in 1453 until the empire's collapse in 1922. Conquest. On the 29th of May 1453, Sultan Mehmed II, the Conqueror, entered Constantinople after a 53-day siege during which his cannon had torn a huge hole in the walls of Theodosius II. Istanbul became the third capital of the Ottoman Empire. Mehmed had begun the siege on the 6th of April 1453. He had hired engineers to build cannons and bombs for the occasion. He also acquired scholars and imams to encourage the soldiers. In accordance with Sharia, Mehmed gave the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Palaeologus 3 chances to surrender the city. He guaranteed the safety of the city's residents with their riches, beliefs and honor. Constantine valiantly refused the offer. After more than a month of fighting, Mehmed advisors were beginning to lose hope. Against the council, Mehmed continued to fight. The night before the final assault, he studied previous attempts to take the city to distinguish potentially successful approaches. On the morning of the 29th of May 1453, the Sultan ordered Adzan, This was not a regular prayer session for religious reasons but rather a scare tactic. The sight of the entire Ottoman army getting on the knees to pray provided an intimidating display of unity to the Byzantine forces designed to overcome the minds before the bodies. Once the fighting started, it went on for 48 days. The wall was beginning to collapse when Constantine sent a letter to the Pope asking for help. In response, the Pope sent 5 ships full of reinforcements, weapons and supplies. Another defense tactic involved Constantine blocking off the port so that the Ottoman army could not get ships into it. Mehmed had his people pave a path from oil tree branches in order to bring 80 ships overland, and placed them into the gulf behind the enemy ships. The Ottoman ships burnt the Byzantine ones in a naval battle. Since the Byzantine army was still holding on after this defeat, the Sultan thought it was time to set up his secret weapon, a huge mobile tower. This tower could hold many soldiers who could be at the same level as the walls of the city, making it easier for them to break into Constantinople. The first group of Ottomans who entered the city were killed almost immediately, with the effect that the other Muslims began to retreat. Witnessing this, the Sultan encouraged his soldiers. Soon after the Sultan's encouragement, the Muslims broke the wall in 2 places and entered the city. In a last attempt to protect it, Constantine attacked the enemy sword raised. However, he was defeated and killed. Finally, Constantinople was under Ottoman rule. Mehmed entered Constantinople through what is now known as the Topkapi Gate. He immediately rode his horse to the Hagia Sophia, which he ordered to be sacked. He ordered that an imam meet him there in order to chant the Muslim creed. I testify that there is no God but Allah. I testify that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. Quote. This turned the Greek cathedral into a Turkish mosque, solidifying Turkish rule in Constantinople. Mehmed ordered the city to be plundered for 3 days. During this time, widespread persecution of the city's civilian inhabitants took place, resulting in thousands of casualties, rapes and forced deportations. Following the sack, Mehmed's main concern with Constantinople had to do with rebuilding the city's defenses and repopulation. Building projects were commenced immediately after the conquest, which included the repair of the walls, construction of the citadel, and building a new palace. Mehmed issued orders across his empire that Muslims, Christians, and Jews should resettle the city. He demanded that 5,000 households needed to be deported to Constantinople by September, imperial capital. By 1459, the Sultan dedicated a lot of energy to bringing prosperity to Constantinople. In several quarters of the city, pious foundations were created. These areas consisted of a theological college, a school, a public kitchen, and a mosque. In the same year, Mehmed sent out orders that any Greeks who had left Constantinople as slaves or refugees should be allowed to return. These actions led it to become a once again thriving capital city, now of the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman the Magnificent's reign over the Ottoman Empire from 1520 to 1566 was a period of great artistic and architectural achievements. The famous architect Mimar designed many mosques and other head buildings in the city, while Ottoman arts of ceramics and calligraphy also flourished. Many tekkas survive to this day, some in the form of mosques while others have become museums such as the Sarahi Tekka and the Sunbul Effendi and Ramazan Effendi mosques and turbs in Fatih, the Galata Mevlevianizi in Beyoğlu, the Yahya Effendi Tekka in Beşiktaş, and the Bektazi Tekka in Kadıköy, which now serves Alevi Muslims as a Samevi. In the final years of the Byzantine Empire, the population of Constantinople had fallen steadily, throwing the great imperial city into the shadow of its past glory. For Mehmed II, conquest was only the first stage. The second was giving the old city an entirely new cosmopolitan social structure. Most of what remained of the Byzantine population, a mere 30,000 persons, was deported. According to the Ashok-Pashazad, a Turkish chronicle, Mehmet then sent officers to all his lands to announce that whoever wished should come and take possession in Constantinople as freehold of houses and orchards and gardens. Despite this measure, the city was not repopulated. So then the Sultan commanded that from every land families, rich and poor alike, should be brought in by force. And now the city began to be populous. Mehmet took much personal interest in the creation of his new capital. On his orders, the Great Mosque and the College of Fatih were built on the old burial grounds of the Byzantine emperors at the Church of the Holy Apostles. Bit by bit, the great Christian city was transformed into a great Muslim city. Even so, the city was not to be entirely Muslim, at least not until the late 20th century. Slavs, Greeks, Jews and Armenians, all of whose diverse skills were needed, were allowed to settle in a city which was to become known as Alampan, a refuge of the universe. According to the census of 1477, there were 9,486 houses occupied by Muslims, 3,743 by Greeks, 1,647 by Jews, 267 by Christians from the Crimea, and 31 gypsies. Mehmet also re-established Constantinople, as it was still called at that time, as the center of the Orthodox Patriarchate. There was also an Italian community in the area of the Galata Tower. Having surrendered before the fall of the city, Mehmet allowed them to preserve an element of self-government. For generations after, they supplied interpreters and diplomats for the Ottoman court. After the conquest of Egypt in 1517, and the Sultan's acceptance of the position of Caliph, Constantinople acquired an additional importance in Muslim eyes. Mosques built by Suleiman the Magnificent and his successors gave the city the unique appearance it still preserves today. The individual communities, though, still lived in self-contained areas, and had little in the way of social interaction, a source of future trouble. Until the 18th century, living standards were at least equal to most of Europe. For example, the development of urban craftsmen's wages was on a level similar to southern and central Europe during the 16th to 18th century. Foundations is vakıfs in Turkish. The Grand Bazaar and Topkapi Palace were erected in the years following the Turkish conquest. Religious foundations were endowed to fund the building of mosques such as the Fatih and their associated schools and public baths. The city had to be repopulated by a mixture of force and encouragement. Suleiman's reign was a time of great artistic and architectural achievements. The architect Sinar designed many mosques and other great buildings in the city, while Ottoman arts of ceramics and calligraphy also flourished. Sufi orders, which were so widespread in the Islamic world and who had many followers who had actively participated in the conquest of the city, came to settle in the capital. During Ottoman times, over 100 tekkes were active in the city alone. Many of these tekkes survive to this day, some in the form of mosques while others as museums, such as the Cerrahi Tekke in Fatih, the Sunbul Efendi and Ramazan Efendi Mosque, and turbs also in Fatih, the Galata Mevlevahana in Beyoğlu, the Yafyar Efendi Tekke in Beşiktaş, and a Bektashi Tekke in Kadıköy, which now serves Alevi Muslims as a semi-V. Modernization. As the years passed, the population increased, from about 80,000 at the death of Mehmet to 300,000 by the 18th century, and 400,000 in 1800. The capital of an empire that stretched across Europe, Asia and Africa, it also became an important diplomatic center, with several foreign embassies. It was only after 1922, following the war between Greece and Turkey, that things really began to change, with the establishment of the new Turkish Republic, built on a wave of nationalism. There was a mass exodus of much of the Greek and Armenian population from Istanbul, which had ceased to be the capital. After riots in 1955, the remaining fraction also departed. The city was modernized from the 1870s onwards with the building of bridges, the creation of a proper water system, the use of electric lights, and the introduction of trams and telephones. Republic of Turkey. After the First World War, the Armistice of Mudros decreed that Istanbul would be occupied by Allied forces. On the 13th of November 1918, the occupation of Constantinople by Allied forces began, ending on the 23rd of September 1923, when the Republic of Turkey was founded under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk on the 29th of October 1923. The capital was moved from Istanbul to Ankara. As a consequence, population collapsed from an estimated 1,125,000 in 1914 to about 500,000 in 1924, but population steadily grew during the later 20th century, the metropolitan population surpassing 10 million in the year 2000. The city's name Istanbul is a shortened version with a Turkish character of the medieval Greek phrase epsilon sigma tau nu pi omicron lambda iota news, meaning into the city, which had long been in vernacular use by the local population. The international name Constantinople also remained in use until Turkey adapted the Latin alphabet in 1928 and urged other countries to use the city's Turkish name in the languages and the postal service networks. In the early years of the Republic, Istanbul was overlooked in favor of Ankara, the new capital. However, starting from the late 1940s and early 1950s, Istanbul underwent great structural change, as new public squares, boulevards and avenues were constructed throughout the city, sometimes at the expense of the demolition of many historical buildings. In September 1955, many ethnic Greek businesses were destroyed during the Istanbul pogrom. This accelerated the departure of Greeks from the city and from Turkey. Jews, Armenians, and Georgians were also targeted. Starting from the 1970s, the population of Istanbul began to rapidly increase, as people from Anatolia migrated to the city in order to find employment in the many new factories that were constructed at the outskirts of the sprawling metropolis. This sudden sharp rise in the city's population caused a large demand for housing development, and many previously outlying villages and forests became engulfed into the greater metropolitan area of Istanbul.